Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. The information here is strictly for educational purposes only and is not a recommendation to trade. You are solely responsible for your own trading actions. No members of DSC Capital were harmed in the making of this video.
Welcome, everybody, to Nostradamus. I am your host, Lord Sean Connery, along with Mohammed, and we are here to discuss what we expect or kind of want to plan out what might happen this week for the oil markets. It is December, so shit gets a little slow as trading desks are going to be a little lighter, so we have to temper a little bit of expectation. But nonetheless, we need to have our plan out in place to kind of see what might go on. So I want to discuss a few scenarios that are pretty much going on. So what we have in front of us is both the volume and market profile on the daily chart. I believe that this is the full session.
Yes, correct.
And we have so current time framing. We have the daily time framing. It is one time framing up. The weekly just shifted to neutral, and that was our big. That was what we covered last week and what our expectations were for last week. That the market would eventually churn out, like kind of carve out a higher low and break the one time framing down on the weekly, which it did. So now, what the fuck are we going to do here? So last week, it actually built quite a solid base to work off of. And we had some pretty good action on both Thursday and Friday, where the market was constantly seeking higher prices. And as it sought higher prices, it was encountering some passive selling. But the delta on the very large contract size was pretty nice. It really showed an indication that there's some, as my friend would say, pro buyers. So, anyways, so yeah, we have some pretty decent structure to lean on. Thursday, we had a look below and fail of Wednesday's RTH low, and if you were to rewatch the tape on that day, you saw the RTH low go. And then it probed it again even further, just by a few ticks. And the lack of interest really set off a catalyst to where a lot of players for lower felt, oh shit, we're not going to get any lower. And it started a short covering cascade. There was no news that drove that. It was just the fact that efforts were made to go lower and dismal participation. If you actually look at a footprint chart, if you rewatch the tape there, it did not look like oil was going to spill to new lows and really take out Tuesday's or Wednesday's full session low, which is very interesting. A really good time to tape to watch. So anyways, the base that we built for that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the Thursday and Friday action really has us looking for higher. But the question is, how high do we go? Because we do have a lot of overhead that we have to get through. And another thing is, it really depends on where we open, which is in 32 minutes. So on Friday's action, we can kind of set up a few scenarios that we're going to talk about the buy scenarios first that kind of give us an idea of where this is going to go. And there's going to be two different buy scenarios, and then also we're going to have a sell scenario as well. We'll discuss that later. So depending on where we open, Friday's full session VPOC was about what, at 60 10 or something around there.
Yeah, 60.
I mean, there's a lot of okay. So there's a lot of powder there. A lot of price exploration to the upside, and then pulled back. And we got this LVN, this double distribution along the full session. So suppose that we open, somewhere within, the VPOC area of Friday. And let's just, for shits and giggles, let's keep it easy. Let's say that we open where we closed. Just assuming that nothing's priced in over the weekend, or nothing new happens over the weekend that really threw off oil. The very first thing that we want to see is probably a pullback into that LVN. That would probably be a safe spot to not blindly take along, but to see how the market reacts there. Friday's overnight was heavily short. There was a lot of sellers pounding the tape, getting absolutely nothing for their efforts. And what probably caused again that move to the upside were sellers getting trapped, sellers getting nothing for their efforts and just getting squeezed. The only thing is they got squeezed into a lot of resting liquidity that did have a way of taking out some of the momentum of the market. It's also Friday, but still, the fact that in that double distribution profile, things closed in that upper distribution, that is a really good feather in the cap for the buyers. So, um, suppose we open where I mentioned, first likely pullback is to see if we could hold that LVN. For the most aggressive buy scenario is a pullback and some sort of structure to be built. We don't want to blindly lean on this because I feel that the participants in Friday's overnight session were already squeezed out. I want to see something get built before we eventually, head higher. Now, how high do we go? Again, it is the start of, December. Well, we're already 1 week in. My first thoughts are taking a look way back at, let's see, where are these dates? My charts. 11/2 and 11/3. Like the November 2nd and 3rd, those highs. I feel that those are the first highs that we're going to possibly challenge. We've already had the overall lower highs being leaned on, like from 11/2 to 11/3, and then we had a lower high also at 11/11, a lower high at 11/18. Once we surpass that 11/18 high, we're going to come in, and that's the first area. The reason why that's the first area, it's not because, oh, let's take new highs. It's because what's left behind the week before. On the 24th and the 25th, there's a gap between that because it's a Friday leading into a Thursday. The 23rd of October, the 24th of October, and the 27th of October left a very heavy amount of traded volume. And I don't feel that we're just going to easily get through that. So, along this buy scenario, if we do have a pullback, the first aggressive pullback to where I mentioned, we're going to seek higher prices, but I don't believe we're going to get much further beyond this 6150 area. We might take out those highs, 6143, 6145, 6142. Those were like these marginal highs that were, kind of made along November 2nd and 3rd. And then I think we're going to hit a wall. We're probably going to hit a wall at 1027. We have a naked VPOC at 6190. Let's see, my eyes are deceiving me. 6157. And then there's probably an RTH VPOC that's naked at 6159. Those areas, we're just not going to churn through. We're not going to be like Al Gore at the North Pole with a fucking flamethrower just melting snow, keeping hope alive for his bullshit. I don't know why I said that, but I just felt that, yeah, those are big ass ice caps. They're not just going to melt away magically unless some geopolitical bullshit comes up, unless OPEC says, you know what, we're going to make some cuts, or Russia Ukraine does not resolve its conflict and it gets heated even more. Something newsy is going to have to push us through that area. Now, if that does happen, I would expect that we're not just going to cut through it. We're probably going to work our way up until this MC VPOC, like a very like the composite VPOC around the 6240s. That's where we could gravitate if we actually have the news and have the driver to actually get further. So we've built a base below us. The question is, how far are we going to go, and what can we expect in December? Yeah, so that is the very first pullback scenario. The second one is we get a little deeper of a pullback. We have some poor lows from Friday's overnight session, and we might want to clean those up. And we might not want to make it so easy for pullback buyers. We might want to fuck them in the ass a little bit and make them feel like, oh well, hey, try to buy here. Nope, no, this ain't gonna work. What I really want to see is Thursday's RTH low hold, which is also the full session. That area was tested against Wednesday's RTH low. That was the finding the disinterest of sellers below Wednesday's RTH low and holding that buying tail. That really, in my opinion, needs to hold. Now, that pullback is going to shift the full session daily time frame back to neutral, but that's okay. We don't have to always hold one time framing up on the daily um, in order to achieve higher prices. It might not be as nice as inconvenient, and again, it's going to be a challenge because when we shift time framing, then we start to question like, oh shit, are we really going to get new highs? It's only going to be one day of shifting. It's not a big deal. But that is the second. That's like as Muhammad would say, the deep dish pullback. We're not going to get the shallow one. That's going to be the deeper one that holds against that action. And again, the upper target for me for this week is probably the 6140 to 50 area. I don't see the market really going through that the two-way, and not the two-way, but just all that leftover volume from the 23rd, 24th, and 27th of October. Okay, now what if we open slightly above the other runaway scenario, the buy scenario, is that we don't get a pullback. We just open. Um, we might open like slightly above Friday's full session VPOC. We could open slightly above. Let's say there's a 6032. That was an HVN, and that was where the VPOC was. On Friday session before it pulled back and it traded an unusual amount of volume at the end. That's where it was. But if we were to open above 6032, in my opinion, that's going to be a slight shallow pullback. We're going to start working our way up to R1. So this other up scenario is the fact that maybe we don't even get a pullback. We just go off to the races. We just start moving up. The market starts auctioning up and leaves us with our dicks in our hands on our bids, and we're not getting shit. The nice part is, again, I don't expect this to get through those 3 days in October. So what could be a nice scenario, that the higher high, higher low scenarios, we get up to this area, the 6140s and 50s, and we start to see some heavy two-way action. We see the market stall, and that's where we could probably get a nice short off and pull back into this very heavy, traded area, probably right back to Friday's VPOC down to the 60s. That's going to give us about 150 ticks of range. That wouldn't be that bad. Will it come all the way back there? That would be very interesting. It might not. It actually might just come in. It might just make that race and then, just kind of fiddle around at 61 even. But that's another possible scenario that kind of gives the same, target expectation, but instead of getting pullbacks, it's just straight off to the races. That is going to suck because those types of movements are really hard to capitalize on. So where we would probably look to capitalize, if that were to happen, is to look for some struggle in the 6140 to 50 area, see if there was some, just some stalling, and then get like a decent short off, and then see how far it can go. It might go all the way back to that deep dish pullback. We might go higher first before we go lower and still maintain like a weekly higher high, higher low. We might start off with one time framing up in the daily and then eventually shift it to neutral and down. Again, like all these possibilities, the possibilities are not endless, but there's a good amount of them. The third scenario, or the scenario that doesn't involve us making higher highs and higher lows on the weekly, is again dependent on where we're going to open. But if we open slightly below or at Friday's full session VPOC, and we attempt higher, but we still get stuck around that 60-30 area or slightly below, because there is some leftover structure that it was leaning on way back on 1118 that looked very interesting. If we attempt higher but we can't make new weekly highs, then what I expect there is for this to come back in, take out those weak lows, those poor lows in Friday's on that Friday leftover. In terms of this, do we make a new weekly low? Maybe we get an inside week. Who knows? But there is also another poor low out there, and I believe it's at the 60. No, it's the 58.27, 58.28. That was left behind, and those were left behind before we got that. We got some news about Russia. I think that those, if we were to not get a new high against the last week's high immediately, those are probably looking to be cleaned up. And if that's the case, then that should yield the a new low on the week. No, sorry, a lower. I believe the
Lower
is
low
what
is
is last week's low?
last week's low is like it's right ahead
Is
of
if
that
it?
50, yeah, it's right ahead of that
Yeah,
58.27.
yeah. So if that's the, I guess, the tertiary, the failure to make new weekly highs, which I don't think is going to happen. I honestly think, like, gun to the head, we're going to make new weekly highs, higher high, higher low. But on the slightest possibility that we get some stall or we get some news that, Zelensky and Putin want to fucking dock each other's dicks and come to terms and peace and, sing kumbaya around a fucking campfire, then that is another possibility that could happen, is that we can go ahead and fail to make that. Maybe we get some news that drives that down and clears up those poor lows. With that, that would strengthen the time frame neutral of the weekly, which is not a big deal, and it also puts us back into that trading range, for December. It's not a non-zero probability. Is it probable? Yes. Or is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not. But again, what else is likely? Some news can hit. Something can change the name of the game. So,
Yeah, agree.
but yeah, those are the thoughts on this week. And again, like, we're in the weeks of December. Um, there's going to be a lot of seasoned traders that just say, fuck it, I just want to shut the computers off. And you might see volumes trading lighter, a lot of slow action stuff that makes you feel like you're watching paint dry on a wall. And that's where we have to be very vigilant and be very choosy on where.
The ending of this video did get clipped out again for some reason. Not sure why this tech issue is going on, but we are working on resolving it. But Rob mostly covered all the scenarios and ideas that we both had. So if you guys did enjoy, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know what you guys think. Take care.